welcome to the Passenger Seat Podcast, a podcast designed to fill your passenger seat with chat about classic cars, usually recorded from my 1968 Morris Minor Peggy. But today we're in a Morris Bullnose from 1926 that goes by the name of Billie. We're joined by the owner in the front seat, and we're going to have a go at driving it, because if you remember a little while back on the podcast I listed a load of cars that I was really keen to drive, and something a little bit older than anything I'd driven before was on that list, and Andy here really kindly has offered me the chance to drive this beautiful Morris Bullnose. So we're going to have a go. I've been around the field twice, and we're going to see how it goes. So let's see if we can remember where everything is. So immediately you go to the foot on the front, and then
you just have to sort of force it quickly. You'll be okay.
There we go. Right. So lifting foot off the clutch and accelerator down, and we're off. So the first thing that's kind of different for me about it is the fact that the accelerator is in the middle on this one, and it's pretty easy to get used to going around the field. But as I said to you, I was worried that if you go out on the roads, when you hit something, you might be tempted to jump on the wrong pedal. But as you've said, it's quite difficult to kind of get your foot across any further, so you have to learn pretty quickly, wouldn't you?
It is something you get used to quite quickly.
Yeah.
I know the first time I drove one of these, I was thrown in at the deep end. I was driving a backup vehicle on the London to Brighton run, and the car I was driving was a conventional car, and then we had to swap around all the vehicles, and I ended up being put into the Bullnose, never even knowing that it had a centre throttle pedal. But it was on quite busy roads and everything else, but you just get used to it so quickly because of the way you hold your feet. You can't really go the wrong way.
And it's surprisingly comfortable, at least for someone of my height, with your feet there and with the steering wheel, and you've got really good view with it all being quite open and things, and avoid these people here.
Yeah.
It's actually quite comfortable to sit in, and I'm finding the steering remarkably easy. And you said that that's because you've had a gear change on the steering.
Yes, it does 3 turns lock to lock instead of 2, as they originally were, which makes it doesn't wander quite so much on the roads as well. You're not overcorrecting it and things. But these cars do tend to wander with the camber of the road. They sort of change direction with the different cambers, so you've got to keep your wits about you on the road when you're steering it.
And I found that with the Morris Minor, with all the kind of glass high side, that when the wind's going, you get blown about a bit. Do you get less of that because it's...
Possibly because you're not really going quite so fast, it may not be such a big thing. It's quite slab fronted. You do get blown around a bit, but you tend to drive it with the roof off all the time anyway. So it's not so much of a problem. You've got a few other little things which you sort of need to do when you're driving. When you're going slowly and you don't want to change down a gear, you can retard the ignition timing and lift that left-hand lever up, and that just retards the timing, which your car does automatically with the bob weights and the vacuum advanced and retired. This one you're doing it manually.
So there's a few more things to kind of be thinking about whilst you're going along.
And it's not very often you would do it, but if you sort of came round a roundabout and you were maybe doing sort of 15 miles an hour and you didn't want to change out of top gear, then you could just retard the timing, and it just gives it a little bit more power at the low speeds.
It's almost like the opposite of overdrive at the top of a gearbox, and like
sort of possible, But a lot of people don't don't use the advanced and retired at all, except for when they start it. You retard the ignition timing to start it, and then once you start it, you advance it, and people just drive it like that the whole time. So you can get away with that on these.
And the gearbox is a crash gearbox, So
crash 3-speed gearbox.
3-speed gearbox. So it's been a case of trying to remember my double declutching practice from a few years ago in Dad's Singer.
There's straight cut gears, so it's quite noisy in first and second gear.
Yeah.
You get the sort of typical whine, but once you go into third gear, then it all quietens down because everything is going the same speed.
Yeah.
The windscreen wiper is vacuum operated as well.
Yeah.
So when you accelerate, you lose the vacuum from the engine.
So when you turn the windscreen washer on, the wiper on, it moves. Ah.
But now if you accelerated, you'll find you'd run out of vacuum, and it's probably not so bad in first gear, but when you're going up a steep hill on a motorway, you suddenly lose it.
Wow. It's interesting how there's so many of these like little things that we've moved so far away from with motoring that it really brings home how basic this was.
Yeah.
And also how well thought out it was to think, well, let's link that up to this to try and get that to work, because I think my dad's ones have got like little motors and stuff in that work off the electric.
Yeah, they later on put motors on them. Yeah, but all of these were just vacuum. Yeah.
It's also surprisingly comfy in terms of the little bumps and movements in the grass here. Like,
it's well sprung. I mean, you would leaf springs all the way around, and you've got half elliptic on the front and 3/4 elliptic on the back.
Yeah.
So you've got the full leaf spring and the half one as well, which goes back up to the chassis. So the back end is very well sprung.
Yeah, Jamie was saying it was more comfortable than the Morris Minor in the back there, so
and there's plenty of room. Yeah, this is the Oxford, so it's 6 inches longer than the Cowley, and a wider body as well. And you've got a slightly more powerful engine. The Oxford is, well, the RAC rating is 13.9 horsepower, whereas the Cowley is 11.9.
Yeah. And you do quite a bit of mileage in it. You said you put a new engine in quite recently and have already done 1,500 miles in it.
Yeah, the new engine went in May and it's done 1,500. I do about the 3,000 miles a year. I've got 3,000 mile insurance, and I'm getting sort of close to my 3,000 miles most years.
Yeah.
But I've in 20 years I've had it, I've worn through 3 sets of tyres. So I'm quite proud that I've not ever had to replace tyres because they perished, as a lot of people do. I believe in using it.
No, and that's the thing, they run so much better when they're used and they're out and about, because that's what they were designed to be done.
Yes, and she goes out summer and winter. I don't mind taking her out in the wet or anything. Try to avoid if it's had a lot of salt put on the roads, but other than that, she goes out winter time as well. It's handy for going down to the tip in it, because you've got so much room in the back, you can throw everything in the back.
And it's great when people use their classics in such a, or vintage in this case, in such a practical way. Try and get a little bit of speed up here, we might get to the third.
Yeah.
Oh, that is a lot quieter, isn't it?
Yeah, everything quietens down once you get into third.
Yeah, quite pleasant cruising with that sound.
Yeah, she sits comfortably at sort of 45.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can sit on sort of dual carriageways most of the time 45, and just occasionally on a hill you have to slow down.
Yeah.
But if you're doing a long journey on dual carriageways, you need to slow down every now and again, because the back universal joint, or the universal joint in the back of the gearbox, only gets lubricated when you're in first and second gear.
Oh, okay.
Because in those days they'd never sit at top gear for any length of time, so so you have to drop it down to second gear every now and again just to give it a little bit of lubrication in that joint. So I try and do that every sort of 10-15 miles or so.
Yeah.
And we're running slightly more power on this engine. We've got a different cylinder head, which is a copy of what they call the Ricardo turbulent head.
Yeah.
So this gives us an extra 10% horsepower as well, which does help on the sort of low down torque. So I don't use it for speed, I use it for just pulling up the hills really.
Yeah. And that's always going to be the slight difficulty, is the hills of them. But
Yeah.
as long as it makes it to the top, it doesn't matter how slow it takes it. Especially when you've got dual carriageways and plenty of space for people to overtake you.
Yes. And this being the 26 Oxford, it has standard 12-inch brakes front and rear.
Yeah.
Before this they had 9-inch optional brakes on the front, and then before that they didn't have any front brakes at all, it was just rear wheel brakes.
Wow.
So these cars normally came with a little warning triangle on the back saying warning 4-wheel brakes, to warn the person behind that's only got 2-wheel brakes that you're going to stop twice as quick as they are.
So to leave you a little bit of space.
Yeah.
Well, this has been incredibly pleasant, and I've really enjoyed it, so thank you very much.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure.
And
you can retard it a bit, it might just get you up the hill, I don't know.
in a lovely quiet third.
Maybe not.
Maybe down to first.
Yeah, a lot of it's because you're on the grass as well.
So I just wanted to add a few more words about the brilliant experience of driving Billie, the 1926 Bullnose in. I had a fantastic time, and it was an absolute privilege to be offered such a wonderful experience. It was really an absolute highlight of my weekend at Thoresby. Whilst I was focusing on learning to drive and kind of afterwards, Andy pointed out some other unique and wonderful features of these cars from this period that you don't often get to see, so I thought I'd share them with you here as well. For example, the headlights tipping is such a cool feature that you don't see on other cars. And there's also these indicators that he's hidden inside the Morris exclusive smoking set that make a really interesting kind of addition. The car's just so well loved and looked after. It was an absolute pleasure to drive, and I hope you've enjoyed hearing about it today and some of the wonderful adventures that Andy has had in this beautiful car. Well, we get that lovely white as we go into kind of wrapping up. So thank you very much for the experience. It's been lovely, and it's been lovely to hear kind of all the things that you do with the car. It's really nice to hear them being used and appreciated for what they were set out to do.
It's an absolute pleasure.
For everyone listening at home, thank you ever so much for listening. Drive safely in whatever you're driving, and happy motoring.